All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so pleased that y'all have an opportunity to join us this morning for a very special edition of Purpose Driven Pivot Coffee with Clay. I know this is different than our normal regularly scheduled hours, but we've got just such this awesome guest that I had to have a conversation with. And so I thank y'all for joining us for this first edition of Coffee with Clay. As a reminder, this is an interview series where I'm not just getting to know leaders that are in my network a little bit better, but also our viewing audience to learn more about what these leaders are up to, how they pivoted on their journey, and just all around great information from people doing some awesome things in Atlanta and across the country. I'm pleased to have Nichola Hines as my guest today. Nichola, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good this morning, Clay. How are you?
I'm doing phenomenal. Thank you so much for joining me. I don't know if you'll have your first cup of coffee with me this morning, but this will be my first. I know some early risers, this might be their second. But I want to thank Shea Latte Coffee, a local woman-owned, black-owned business, for being our sponsor today. Cheers to Shayla. How are you enjoying your coffee over there this morning, Nichola?
Oh, it's really tasty. I tasted it yesterday first, and it's like, oh,
Okay.
this is
Had
great
a test
flavor.
drive.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, let me test drive and make sure. But no, it's really good. It's great flavors. I mean, the aromas coming out of the bag was awesome. I was just like, oh, this smells really good. So
Yeah. Now, how do you prepare yours? Do you do kind of something quick, or do you do like you run it through the machine, or how do you prefer to
so
prepare?
COVID has made me more of a coffee drinker. Typically, I'm an espresso, like cappuccino latte type of person. But with COVID and not really being in coffee shops, I just bought a quick little, I think it's a Mr. Coffee, something like that, Black and Decker, some
Yeah.
one of those little quick little machines.
Mhm.
So it's just an automatic, turn it on, put the water in, and it brews
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. That's
so
better than
yeah.
what you can get in most places. But the awesome thing about coffee, once you get a nice blend, like what Shea Latte provided, we're drinking the. Did you get bourbon bread pudding?
I got the bourbon,
Did you
yes.
get that? Okay, I did as well. And so you got an awesome blend. The way you make it, the way you prefer it, it's awesome. And so I've got my French press here, team. And so I'll be French pressing. I got it steeping for a little bit, enjoying my first cup for the day. And so all you coffee drinkers out there, be sure to check out Shea Latte. And
Oh
thank you
yeah,
so much for your support.
it's
Cheers. We
tasty.
can kind of do like this middle of the screen,
Oh
like,
wait a minute, wrong way. There you go. Cheers.
uh, wait a second. Okay, yeah, we.
You were
All
right. The other way. The other way.
right.
There you go.
Boom. Okay, this is
Yeah.
virtual. Hey, it's virtual, y'all. Y'all
It's
got to be with
opposite,
us. So
right? You're like, wait a minute. Yeah.
that's actually my
Cheers.
first virtual cheers. But nonetheless, I want to get into your story, your background, because Nichola, you are an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You're a civic leader with the Office of the Inspector General, which I got so many questions about because while it's a new way of accountability and local governance, so many people even locally said, "Greg, what is the Inspector General's office?" I said, "I'm excited to have Nichola tell us about it." Because I could talk a little bit about it, but you as the expert serving on that particular body and leading these conversations
Yes.
along with working with elected officials here in Atlanta. I want to make sure people get to know about that. You also are the president of the League of Women Voters for Atlanta Fulton County, which is a historical institution in the civic space for not just voter registration and information and education, but get out the vote activities, content year round. I mean, y'all have been swinging for the fences and have had just awesome leadership and teams that I've looked up to as an Atlantan over the years. So excited to hear about that. Ladies and gentlemen, she has been in the hospitality industry for over 2 decades. And so her experience in the realm of hospitality and what she'll also be able to talk about in that regard, and how all of those experiences that I just mentioned when it comes to pivoting. Yvonne Mann says hello. Good morning.
Good
Good morning,
morning.
Yvonne. Cheers.
Good
Got your cup
morning.
of coffee with
I know. Have some coffee.
and there's just when we look at this, the context of the year, I know that you've made some pivots on your leadership, things that you've doubled down on, and love to hear about all of those different things. But first, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and all of that fun stuff. I know we talked a little bit about coffee and your love for coffee, but Let us know just a little bit more about, Nichola as we get started.
I know, as I say, you kind of ran down my resume a little bit. I'm a born and raised New Yorker. I'm actually from Long Island, Amityville, Long Island. So there's a big difference between being from Long Island and New York City. So I'm a proud Long Islander.
So you got to represent, right?
Yes, got to represent. So this is my second time living in Atlanta. First time I was here, I would say from 2007 to 2011, and then came back in 2013. As you stated, I'm 2 decades rather, into the hospitality industry. I started off.
I don't know how you do that. You look 25.
I get that. I was gonna say, I get that all the time. People always like, "How old are you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in my mid 40s. We're gonna leave it like that." I'm in my mid 40s. So yeah. But and prior to that, I actually was in advertising and I was in asset management. So straight out of school, I'm an alumni of University of Southern California. I have a dual degree in economics and sociology. And so I started out in asset management, moved into advertising, and then 9/11 happened. And being in New York and working in New York City, that was one of my first pivots, So here I am in advertising, but my passion has always been food and beverage. I actually wanted to open up my own restaurant when I was 18. And back then, back then, what most people don't realize is that, these celebrity chefs and obviously foodies, as people call themselves, didn't exist. You went to culinary school or any type of school like that, it was considered a trade. And my family was like, you're an honor student, you're going to college. You're not doing a trade.
That's that's a good point. You know what? You're spot on. The same way we just didn't have that type of conversation.
Yeah, I think like Emerald, maybe, Emerald was around a little bit, there was some, chefs that were known, but not to the point where it was TV shows and you could actually make a lot of money. And especially in our culture, that was like, you were going to just be working in the kitchen. Like, the vision of owning a restaurant, like a full service restaurant and making a lot of money. My family was like, you're a little too smart for that. We need you to go to college.
It mirrors, so your love for food was the same as my love for art. And so it mirrored my experience growing up. I was always the most artistic student in my cohort going through Atlanta public schools. And nobody along that line said, "Hey, Greg, you should consider this being a career."
Right.
Now, and it was always this extra thing. So to your point, the narrative has fully shifted, not just in the arts, but also, I consider, in the culinary space, you're just as creative as an artist that is using a medium to draw or paint. And so it's cool to see that narrative kind of change.
Yeah,
and people like you lead in that.
And it's great because I think, looking at young folks and young people of color having those opportunities, because not everyone is meant to go to a traditional college and a traditional university and get, that traditional bachelor's degree. And I love that now a lot of culinary programs are actually giving 4-year degrees. You can go to, Johnson & Wales, you can actually go to Cornell and study hospitality. So those opportunities are so important nowadays. So that's kind of how,
and I wanted to add, I think that leaders like you in industry have made that possible. I think that narrative stands still in time if you don't have folks like you swinging for the fences and taking risks. I just think that that's the case. And you represent this collection of people in the industry that have gone and made these names and the waves. And I think media has played a role in that too, like you say.
It does. And I will say, as a woman, and then a woman of color in the culinary industry, I was always in operations, even though I did go to culinary school. I was saying that 9/11 kind of was my first pivot. I went to culinary school, had a great opportunity to work for the late Nick Ashford and his wife, Valerie Simpson, in their restaurant in New York City. Went there to work for TGI Fridays, but moving up, I've always been front of the house, even though I have the experience to do back and front. But it's still very unique. We're in 2020, and to see a woman and then a woman of color to be in operations in the restaurant industry is still unique. So I enjoy being that person. And then when I'm meeting young folks, to let them understand, the first thing out of their mouth is they think I'm HR. They're like, "Are you HR?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "I'm your boss's boss." Like, I have to be like, "I'm your boss's boss," because they don't see that image. All they
Hmm.
see is, unfortunately, all they see is like white men. So they don't
Hmm.
realize that, hey, I could potentially be that person. And over the years, I've had so many great conversations with young folks to hopefully pivot their careers. So yeah, so 9/11 was my first pivot of life and going after my dreams and going into the culinary and the restaurant industry. And
Yeah. So building this profile, building this experience, and like you mentioned, you call it the front and the back. So the back is the kitchen.
yes,
What's the appropriate term for folks like
well, it's front of house, so FOH and BOH, back
FOH?
of the house. Back of the house is
From
the kitchen. Front of the house
okay.
is like where all the guests and stuff sit and where your
Okay,
servers
got
and
it.
stuff.
Got it. So that's the first note for if you haven't been taking notes, that's the maybe the second or third note, FOH and BOH, right? And so this experience, you create this dual kind of vertical land growing as an executive over the years. Let's talk a little bit about how COVID has, well, not a little bit, a lot about, because it's transformed the industry. I know that a lot of our favorite, I'm not a foodie, like a lot of my peers are, a lot of people that we know,
Mhm.
because on the social circuit in Atlanta, the foodie circuit is, again, you're a leader in that space too when it comes to just nice. I mean, we bump into each other and share
Right.
with your friends, which is just awesome, right? And so grateful for you and your time, even this morning. Right? But when it comes to the restaurant industry in Atlanta and across the country, what is your conversation now with the, FOH, BOH, what is that? Kind of walk us through that.
I mean, it obviously caught all of us off guard. One of my divisions in my company is a dining diva, and what we used to do is pop up restaurants. We would find unique spaces from coffee shops to private lofts to museum spaces and even rooftops and build like, a full service restaurant from scratch, tables, linens, wait staff. My chef is in the kitchen making things from scratch. And it hit us, myself as my company and then as payers, because I have, friends like I'm friends with Delia from Delia's chicken sausage, and she's not opening until January.
Yeah.
We were just talking about because of the neighborhood, Yay Burger decided that they're not reopening, and that was kind of
Mhm.
like a healthy staple for burgers. Um,
Those are two businesses right in my neighborhood too.
right, and like you want to talk about the West
Interesting.
Side, like you have West Egg, who has been doing a great job when it came to just safety, and even now that they've opened up their restaurant. But it's hard. I mean, if you think about the business aspect of it, is a restaurant's built by how many people can fit in a restaurant, right? That's what your sales are built on. If you have a restaurant that can fit 50 people, every time you serve, you want 50 people. And
Mhm.
now with COVID, you're now looking at maybe 20, 25 people. So your sales are half, slashed, even though you're open. It's like, how do you survive? How do you make money? How do you pay your staff? And then it hurts the hourly people, such as your cooks and your wait staff, because now you can't afford everybody to work. And so it just becomes a trickle effect. Grateful for delivery services because obviously that kind of helps a lot of these businesses to keep
Yeah.
moving forward.
And we've seen a lot of businesses that we support, even modify their menu to the point where, where you might get one or two meals at a time. You can get these family size things and kind of enjoy
Hmm.
them throughout the week. And yeah,
And
so
that's what they had to do. And even myself, we were laughing a little bit before we got on about last night. Greg, you were saying I was working. I was like, I was working. One of the fun things that we used to do was in-person cocktail classes, like seasonal cocktails, have everyone around, about 30 people. And
yeah,
you can't do that. You can't be like in a small space trying to do that and without it costing a lot of money on the other end to our customers. And that's not something I wanted to do. So last night I did my first like public virtual class, and it was fun. We had about 13 people registered. I think about maybe 8 of them showed up and just had
mhm,
fun. We're doing it like this. I'm in my space, they're in their space, they get their list of cocktail stuff, ingredients, and we walk them through and had a good time and a great Friday night. And that's kind of what, once again, here's the pivoting of changing what I love to do. Uh, People have been really excited about bringing us into their homes,
okay,
just because they either don't feel comfortable going to restaurants yet, or they have a larger party. Like they still want,
mhm,
families and people still want to have celebrations. We've been everywhere from someone's backyard with a tent to close families in their home. And they feel more comfortable with myself, my chef, and maybe one other employee of my list. to come into their homes and prepare for them. And we do everything, safe. We are wearing a mask the whole time.
Yeah.
Food service people always wear gloves, so that's nothing new for us to wear gloves while we're handling. But wearing a mask, we help the guests and the hosts make sure that their house is, safety precautions. Like one of our last ones, we had, I think it was 4 couples, so 8 people, and we set it up where every table was for 2 people, so people weren't sitting next to each other. So they had this whole restaurant experience in their home.
Okay.
The host was great. She cleaned out her dining room area, and then we kind of set up little individual tables there, and everyone had their own individual place settings and table decor. So think about it, like you wouldn't be able to put 8 people in a restaurant right now sitting next to each other. So they were still able to have a birthday celebration with their close family and friends and still have safety precautions. So that's, for the industry. I used to work in the airport. It's still dead. If you look at Atlanta airport, certain terminals are still moving, but the smaller terminals like Terminal T and like your E's and your F's are very slow, and D are very slow. Just A and B is like the busiest ones right now. So that's hurting people too.
Talk a little bit about, when we think of forecasting in that space, the restaurateur space, we dedicate so much square footage to it, and even in the development of newer things, there are cranes going up all around me. In the retail space, planned restaurants, certainly when it comes to the appropriated space for airport concessions. What are your thoughts about that before we get into some of the civic stuff? As an expert, I wouldn't want to, get your forecast on that.
It's good. And it's interesting because, like I said, I have a Dining Diva, and that's one division of my company. My company overall is a hospitality company. So we have a project management and concept development division. And surprisingly, I have about 4 or 5 projects in the works that are restaurants, and people are still building. There's one that I'm working on. It's like a brunch bar out in Mapleton, and her bar is to seat about 40 people. But until she opens, she's got a forecast that it's going to be 20 people. Even though she has all the seating, and until like we see where COVID is, where's the pandemic's going to be, she wants 40 people every time she serves breakfast, and the terminology is turns. So, we all sit there as general people. We normally sit there for an hour to eat. That's why sometimes if you're eating out there,
who sit down for an hour and eat?
But that's why I was gonna say, once you're a little bit past the hour, that's when you start seeing your waiter and waitress come by a little bit more, because the terminology is we're trying to flip that table. So we're trying to get you up and out so we can get another person.
Sit there about 3-4 hours.
Right. And that's when you start getting the ugly looks from the everybody. You're like, can they get up? Like, because that hurts everybody. It hurts the owner. It hurts your server, because by that time, 3 or 4 hours, they could have had 3 more checks come through, which means more tips. Because y'all still only gonna tip on that one bill. So it's not like you're gonna tip for 3 hours of sitting there.
My last interview was with a gentleman by the name of Daryl George, and he is a brunch expert. And they go out and, listen, back when I was even going out and doing a lot of the brunches, the environment of just sitting and having a good time. If somebody was to mention the term, piece to us, people would have looked at them like,
Right. And you don't really say, because, we are in customer service, but let me tell you, everybody who's listening, if you were sitting more than an hour and a half in a restaurant and have not ordered anything else to increase your check, you are getting talked about. Just an FYI. So at least if you're going to sit long, keep on ordering, because it helps. Like I said, it helps the owner. It helps the server, because the check is now bigger, which means you're going to tip better, and it helps everyone all around. But if you're going to just sit there and say, oh, I finished my eggs and my coffee, and then sit there for 3 hours, or your mimosa, and you sit there for 3 hours and you didn't order another bottle, you didn't order another round, yeah, you're hurting everybody. So that's just my tip out there for everybody. Like, I need y'all to get ahead and either get up or order more. That's it. That's the insider tip. That's the insider tip there.
That's beautiful. Spoken like a true professional. So the forecast around, I think that
everyone's going to have to forecast half.
Does that, in the financing realm, when you talk about getting loans for businesses, do you think that will cause, financing structures to kind of shift as well? I know that, how you pay back your terms of financing and things of that nature is pretty consistent and regular. Nobody's gonna. I don't think folks are gonna change. Net 30 type scenarios and things of that nature. But when it comes to how those finance and things are structured, has there been innovation in that space, or is things pretty much the same? You get what
No,
I'm?
I mean, it's kind of the same, but it's difficult for financing. I do have a client right now that, pre-COVID, she was able, was like all this money was basically lining up for her project. And now it's kind of like, it's harder for her to finish financing her project because of it's a restaurant. They don't want to take the risk on it, even though her credit itself is great. It's just the risk. It's the return on investment on this loan. So what happens if you take a loan out? And restaurants are not cheap. I mean, minimum you're spending at least $1 million. If you're doing a sit down type of restaurant, you're spending a minimum $1 million. What happens if you end up defaulting that $1 million on that loan? So that's what banks are looking at. Like, it's not easy for restaurant owners to get those loans. I mean, it's going to be a special banker who sees it past the next year and saying that we're going to get over this. It's going to have to be a special banker. Yeah. I'm not a finance guru. I do know finances from the industry, and you always want your bottom line to at least to come down anywhere between 10 to 20% of your top line sales, and that's including everything: paying back loans, paying employees, benefits, the cost of food, the cost of beverages. So you want to make sure you're making that amount, and banks are looking at that. If you know that, hey, as I stated, the brunch space has 40 seats. And if she's looking to sit 40 seats, maybe 3 to 4 times a day, she's not going to be able to do that. And her sales is based off of that. So now she's looking at 20 seats 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah.
And that's if 20 people show up. Because,
Max,
even though, she's only going to seat 20 people, but she would need 20 people to show up all the time. Yeah. So I'm like, I advised her about looking at, when she gets open, catering, to goes, just, delivery services, just to help the financial bottom line, because you're going to have to find sales from other places. And it's going to be more of the restaurant owner being more creative on how they do it. As I stated before, like the one client I had that's having a little bit of financial difficulties because just loaning wise, she doesn't want to dig into her own money, which you don't. You don't want to like, hey, I'm just going to strap myself if you can get a loan. We were talking about that, and I told her, I said, well, you need to get a van. Because it's like, I was like, you need to get a van, you need to do catering, because that's going to help you with your sales, at least for the first half of the year. It's going to help you with your sales.
Good deal. So as we look at first quarter of next year, maybe we'll have you provide some more insight on that we can send back out to some of our listeners and viewers to give just additional context, because I know a lot of folks in our network are excited about some of the opportunities as we look at the future, but being real about those things on the business side, from a consumer side, having experts like yourself in the space make all the difference.
Oh yeah, and that's why I try to get people all the time to understand when they look at my concept development and project management side of the business, they gawk at possibly my fees or whatever, especially my minority. I tell them, I said, you know what, you're better off paying me the fees now than not being open or not being open properly or not understanding, especially if you've never been in this industry before. Because that's a big risk. People look at the glamour part of restaurants, and it's not glamorous at all. It's like, we get to meet and greet a whole bunch of people. We, if you're in the restaurant industry, you see the chef in a nice jacket, and you might see the manager walking around with a nice suit and dress on. But
that's all FOH stuff, right?
Well, the manager with the dress and the suit on is FOH. The chef is BOH, kitchen, back of the house.
Chef BOH comes to the FOH, right? I'm trying to use the terms. I'm trying to show you that you've been great.
Yeah, so back of the house, you get those, people look at it and it's like, oh, it's just so glamorous. I mean, I can talk about the years of the celebrities and rich people I've met and dealt with. Yeah, it's great, but we work a lot of hours. You don't get a lot of pay. even as a salary manager, you work really hard. On average, as a manager's average, you're working about 60, 70 hours a week. And that's just the manager who's working for the company. Now, if this is a mom and pop type of restaurant, you have to look at that. I mean, they're the owners and the workers a lot of times. So if you spent 60 hours in a restaurant working and then having to spend another 20 hours for the business side of it.
Sure.
So, it's not glamorous at all. So, and as I said, for me, Heinz Hospitality overall is the company. I tell people all the time when they come and talk about, oh, I want to start a food truck, or I want to open up a restaurant, I want to do to go. I get the face when I talk about my fees, but then I'm like, but guess what? I'm going to get your finances straight. I'm going to get you the right contracts. I'm going to get you the right staff. We're going to build this, and it's going to be built properly so that you can work it and understand it. And if you don't want to be in the restaurant, we're going to find those managers that can work the restaurant for you.
Sure. That's turnkey stuff. All worth investing into. So thank you. I just didn't know all of this stuff. These types of opportunities and it's been beautiful for me. And that's why it's great to just talk to people that I've known through this platform, because I'm learning just so much more about these dynamic people. And our networks are learning so much more about what they may not know about you on the surface, but being a real professional in that space, it's awesome to hear, Nichola.
Well, thank you.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about, from the business side of things, you've been leaning in, but you said, you know what, I'm not going to stop there. I'm in Atlanta. I'm from the big city. I love this place, and I want to get plugged in and involved and engaged.
Greg, you're about to get my New York card taken away. Talk about, I love this city.
No.
They're gonna take my New York card. They'll be like, you supposed to live in New York.
They're like keys, like a key loop. You always have those keys. You can go in and out of those doors. And so can't nobody take your keys,
Okay. You hear that? All of my New York fam out there, don't take my keys away.
When you know what that used to be back in the day, and nobody else knows, you can still have that key.
Great.
You have the knowledge, And so I'll say, and Yvonne is saying, thank you, Clay. This is a great interview. Nichola is the best. No NY, she is Amityville. Representing. Awesome.
And I think we had one question before we get into the civic part.
Okay. Cool. Let me take a look at this. What's being done to encourage bankers to diversify their restaurant financing portfolio to ensure that minority-owned businesses are positioned to start their restaurant concepts in their neighborhoods as these in-town communities are being repopulated? Tangi, thank you so much for that great question.
I know that's
Shout
a
out
great
to
question.
Tangi.
Yes, thank you, Tangi.
Doing so much great work in the community.
Yes, she is. I can't really speak about what they're doing in banks and diversity, but what I can do is about minority owners, bankers, is you have to have your documents in order. Like any business, until you actually build a business credit, it's on your personal credit. And that's hard because, sometimes we don't have the best credit. But they look at your personal credit, but also having all your documents in place. You have to have forecasts. You have to have profit and loss statements. You have to have balance sheets ready. And these are all estimate because your business is not open, but you have to have these all lined up. Like I said, what I do is help with my clients before they go to the bank. I secure proposals for contractors. If it's a new location, we have to use general contractors. So I gather those proposals because the banks are going to look for that. They want to look at making sure that you've done all your due diligence and getting everything. Equipment, they want to know an estimate of how much equipment's going to cost. So those are the little things you just can't go to the bank and say, hey, I have a great idea. And these, especially if you have to go to the bank, this is the important part of your business plan, is that financial aspect of your business plan if you're seeking finance. And they do also want to look, how much of your own money are you putting into it? You don't have to put a lot, but you have to put something into it. You just can't be like, I want you 100% finance my business. And that's just business 101. I think now banks are really, I think communities in general are really open for minority businesses. This is the perfect time to be a minority business. And if you are a restaurateur or interested to be in a restaurateur, this is definitely a great time. We have so many food deserts here in Atlanta that if you find the right spot, Like I said, you just have to do your research. You have to do your surveillance research. How many people are walking past? And it's the tedious stuff. It's like sitting on a corner and really counting cars. Like, hey, in an hour, 100 cars go by. Typically, that can be 20 people who walk into your restaurant. Those are the data that you need to do. And a lot of us jump in, not realizing, like I said, this is the non-glamorous part of the restaurant business, not walking in and understanding these little things that needs to be done for it.
Good, good, awesome, beautiful, beautiful. And so, thank you for that question, Tangi. And so, going back to the civic piece, and I know that we're not going to fully leave the business stuff if we have to come back to it, but I want to make sure we talk a little bit about why you're leaning in. I know that there's been a lot of conversations around Atlanta investigations, the ethics board, and there was, a lot of conversation around the inspector general's office. I don't know if the city has an inspector general at this time, but I wanted to kind of start from this framework of, you know, what does that mean for the city of Atlanta? The makeup of it, and you can go, deep dive into it as well because I want to make sure it's informative. But that why, in the essence of why you pivoted in that way, I want to make sure we cover that too because it's hard work.
It is. And interesting enough, I've actually been on the board for the last 4 years. So anyone that's from Atlanta and who's been here for a while, it used to be called the Board of Ethics, up to this year. So it was the Board of Ethics. I joined it 4 years ago as just a member on the Board of Ethics. And typically, we don't really, it's interesting because the Board of Ethics, because of the ethics code for the city of Atlanta, is very defined. And a lot of people look at us and say, well, I don't understand why you guys didn't know about this or didn't know about that, because the Board of Ethics is only set up to hold people accountable if they broke the ethics code.
Okay.
So anything outside of ethics code wasn't under our privy. So we have an office, ethics office with an ethics officer, and we would get, hotlines and all that stuff. And if it didn't fall into that privy, if it broke the ethics code, it had to get passed on to someone else. A lot of times audit would find something, red flag it. If it wasn't in that ethics code, then it would either go to legal or another department to investigate.
And the city council probably
and so
creates
that's what started really the conversation about the inspector general.
And so the city council
originally it was
creates
going to
the ethics
be
code.
the office.
I'm sorry. The city council creates the ethics code.
The city. It was created. Well, yeah, it was a legislation that was built by the city council a couple of years ago, like a couple of decades actually. I think it's been it's been like at least a decade and a half, if I'm not familiar right about it. So this is an old code. And once again, it dealt with gifts, it dealt with campaigning, it dealt with use of city property, ethical issues, even though compliance and ethics in business kind of go hand in hand, but we didn't do compliance stuff. We didn't deal with procurement. It was, hey, if you had a city credit card and you didn't use it for city activities and used it for personal activities and didn't pay the credit card back, that's an ethical issue. Mm-hmm. If you were the guy who works for Watershed and you're driving around with a Watershed truck, but decide to do a whole bunch of family errands in your truck, in the city truck, that's an ethical issue.
All these Christmas gifts on the back of the truck.
Right. Yeah. And then even gifts, because, with my experience of being, in the industry, the hospitality industry so long, I have personal relationships that allow me to, indulge in life, because of personal relationships. But if I didn't have those personal relationships, I couldn't accept hey, I have some tickets to go see, the Braves play the Mets, because people know I love the Mets. So, that type of thing. It would be unethical to get those tickets because then it looks like it's a bribe and all that stuff. So those are the things that fall under the ethics code. A lot of things that we read in the paper dealt with compliance and procurement, which did not fall underneath our board. And so there was no office that was overseeing that process and how to investigate those processes. And if there was needed to be some type of prosecutorial issues, who was going to do it?
Okay.
And so it went from the Office of Ethics. It was supposed to be ethics officer and an independent compliance officer. So we kind of changed names in between there. We were supposed to be the Board of Ethics and Independent Compliance. Independent compliance really didn't stick that long. So we were looking for a compliance officer. Before we can even get to a compliance officer, it changed again, and legislation was built to have an inspector general. And so the umbrella is the Office of the Inspector General, which would deal with the ethics office is one division, compliance is another division, and then the oversight of procurement. So not the procurement office itself, but just the oversight and investigational part of procurement will be part of the office.
Okay, so added just a little more teeth to it. I think that closing that gap is, and you mentioned the media. I mean, there have been so many conversations around, just ethical things and procurement related things at City Hall in the media. And it sounds like some of that has been kind of, not necessarily fair to the ethics board. And so this inspector general's, the new verbiage, new policies on the books give you a little bit more teeth to, live up to some of those things.
Right, because now we're still dealing with ethics issues. So, if people want to still violate the code, you still get investigated. Now that when there's a red flag with audit, it can come to the inspector general and look at it and see if there's a compliance issue with that. Or if there's a procurement issue, they will overlook contracts, if there's a red flag with a contract or any mishandling. The inspector general, the office inspector general is definitely needed for public trust. Just to understand that all these, like you said, all these holes, all these loopholes are tied together now. And the great thing, what a lot of people don't understand, Atlanta's very unique with our board. We are one of very few, if only, and we might be the only city that our board is independent. Nobody on our board has been nominated or appointed, nominated by any executive branch person. So nobody from city council, no one from the mayor's office nominates anybody on this board. We are nominated by citizens of this city. There are 9 different entities that are represented on this board, from all the way from the board I represent, the League of Women Voters, to the Association of CPAs for Atlanta, Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, Gate City Association, Atlanta Bar Association. So we kind of represent a whole group. And like I said, there's 9 separate different ones. We have one individual that represents the 7 universities that make up the city of Atlanta. So, we all come from different walks of life, which is great. 3 of us are lawyers. Like I said, we have a CPA. We have a ex-FBI whose specialty is in fraud. We have a couple of business people on there. We have a teacher, a university teacher. So the way we look at things as a board is very complementary. And once again, there's no outside influence.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of our boards and a lot of boards across the country typically always has someone who's nominated from a mayor's office or nominated from some type of executive branch position. And, and typically you'll see them listed like, oh, nominated here, nominated there. And that's the beauty of our board. And now knowing that we have the Office of Inspector General underneath that, same thing. There is no outside influence because the Office of Inspector General reports into the board, and that's who they report into.
Good. Just listening to you, I think back to my days in municipal government, at a certain level where I had a P card, a purchase card, and even aside from how the city of Atlanta has been, and we just keeping it, 1,000, we've got to recognize that, we've had a lot of conversations both locally and nationally about procurement issues, about ethical issues. And so I think from a public confidence standpoint, it's great to hear a lot of what you're talking about, Nichola. But even without those stories being at play, I remember a lot of conversations that I'd be having with, city managers and leaders in, governments I was working with, where folks had P cards and there were policies, but they didn't always align with the actions. And then when somebody got, out of pocket with a particular purchase, who was checking that outside of a finance department or someone that just said, hey, this isn't necessarily my job. Like who is kind of checking that over and over again? And again, I think it's a public confidence type of conversation. And while you, as a leader, you have to be responsible and accountable for your folks as you kind of navigate through everything, that's on
Mhm.
your watch. I think that public confidence piece just has to be at play. And so it's great to hear that, that the independence is there. And I didn't know some of the things that you were talking about. And so it's really good information.
Yeah,
It's great.
and like I said, we've always been independent, but there was that loophole of all the other pieces that didn't fall underneath our board. And
Mhm.
now we can look at it. The legislation is kind of set up a little bit more that we are an appellate type of board too,
Okay.
because they have allowed open subpoenas from both the ethics officer and the inspector general to them to do subpoenas and to go ahead and uh, put out any sanctions and stuff, out. So if an individual feels that they are overstepping or whatever and want to appeal, then they can come to the board and appeal their case to us. So it's not like a shut-in case. You do an investigation like anybody else. They will
Hmm.
follow the trail. If it
Hmm.
leads to something, you would get a sanction, you would get fined, you would get whatever is deemed reasonable.
I'm with it.
And they have an opportunity to come back to us and say, I want to fight this.
There's some
So
due diligence. Yeah. Okay. Okay. It was just kind of.
yeah. And so, obviously, because we do have Open Records Act, we don't talk about open investigations in public setting.
I'm not going
Um,
to ask you about any. I'm not going to ask you
no,
about
no,
anything.
yeah, I was gonna say it's
I
like
t-
nothing in public setting with the Open Records Act and
you
stuff.
get
But as they're building
right.
their investigation, you get build your investigation. They come to us and say, and we've been doing that for a while because part of
Sure.
our preview was financial disclosure. So we will see a lot of appeals during that time frame.
Mm.
Um, because people ignore hey, you need to do your financial disclosure, or they left the position and it's a year later, you still got to do it up to a year. You still got to do your financial disclosure up to a year after you leave the city. Um, and we will
So
get
even
people
after you
come and
leave the
say,
city, you still have this space to say, "Hey guys, we gotta come back to the table because we might see some interesting stuff." Okay.
and that's public. And our latest, most public thing was our ex CFO.
Hmm.
He had already left the city, but he had ethical violations.
Hmm.
Um,
But that was during
that
his time there. I was saying, like, even
it
after
was
you
during his
leave.
time,
Yeah.
but his violations and citation actually happened after he left.
Sure,
So
sure, sure, sure,
he
sure.
broke
Okay.
the ethical code while he was in office, and then um, the investigation wasn't over until he had already left office,
Hmm.
and so we still imposed the fines on him.
Hmm. And for those
Um,
folks that are watching, I mean, that has been in the media a whole lot. And so,
right, and
for
so yeah, and there's different parts because we, as I said before, we were only under the ethical code, so he had credit card issues under the ethical code. What you will see is in a paper a lot of times is about the procurement part that was violated, and you'll see that part in the paper a lot. I think they only did like maybe one or two articles about us giving him his fines, and everything else is about the procurement things that he's done also. So yeah, so there's a lot of little pieces. But the good thing is now, very confident about the inspector general. We just and I just actually just finished a press release that has to go out, but we just nominated and had the person appointed on December 7th, our first inspector general.
that's hot news. That's hot off the press. I
That's
was
hot off
going
the
to ask you,
press.
like,
The press release is not even
what,
like sent to the city yet.
well, let me tell
But
you this. So here's what's interesting, right? So in this, and this is for the listening audience as well. There's this groundswell of information that always comes up around this topic, right? What I just couldn't find a lot of information about. It's such a progressive move, right? In the work that you're doing, I just couldn't find a lot of information, and this happened back in February. The
Mhm.
the formal change in the policy coming on the books, and so while I know that we've been in pandemic and a lot of things have been happening, I can only imagine how you all are pivoting to get the work done and meeting and all of that stuff, process and procedure wise. But maybe with this appointment, we'll see a lot of things come forward in the media because I want us to be able to create this narrative, especially the folks that love this city, like yourself as well, for all of the things that people have opinions about what's been going on. We've got to also shine a light on how the city of Atlanta is leading the way with these types of opportunities as well.
Oh yes,
And
and
that
it was a
story just
long
isn't over.
process. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a long process because the legislation and the amendment to the city charter was in February, and it's probably the last thing you're going to see is like a February posting, um, because we went into uh, obviously pandemic, city shut down.
Yeah.
Our last public meeting was February. We didn't meet in March.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't meet in March. We typically don't meet in April anyway, so we didn't have anything in April. And the city hall itself was working virtually. And at the point of, I think, May, they still hadn't figured out how city boards were going to meet, like
Yeah.
in terms of like, like I said, the governing board, our governing board, citizen review board, all these boards, they didn't really figure out yet how was they going to be able to meet and still
Hmm.
be a public meeting. So we
Hmm.
didn't meet until August publicly. But in behind the scenes, we had been working really hard. Great thing with conference calls, and like I said, the board is just such a great board that we are able to communicate. So we did a lot of conference calls, a lot of Google Docs to share information. What does the job description looks like? Who do let's have a conversation about who's going to be the search firm. Let's take a
Sure.
vote, and we're doing all this stuff behind the scenes to get it ready, because now we're not meeting, we meet once a month. Now we're not meeting once a month, so we're like, okay,
Hmm.
how do we get this going? And that was part of myself being the chair. I was officially elected as chair in January, so I had to work with my board for those
I don't
months.
think I knew you were the chair. So you're the chair of that body and the president, League of Women Voters?
Yes.
Listen, all right, leadership.
So
Okay.
yes, I am the chair
Lean
of the
in. I
governing
love it.
board. The
Double
chair of the
down.
governing
I'm with
board.
it.
It's like just
I'm
whip it.
with
Right?
it. Nah, that's
Yeah.
that
So
double down stamp. That's that boom boom. That's that double down stamp.
maybe I should have put both of my
Uh-huh.
little pins on me, right? Like my.
No, listen,
It's like yeah. So
represent.
yeah, I am. Yeah. So I am the chair of the governing board, the new governing board of the Inspector General, of the Office of Inspector General, and I am the president of the League of Women Voters. So yes, I have double duty, and doing it, both of them virtually can get a little crazy.
Sure.
Uh, but like I said, so happy that my board, we worked so great together during those months that we didn't meet, because it really was, we had the legislation and the charter, the city charter change. We went from there to having to change our bylaws because our bylaws were outdated, because one, the name was changed. So we worked on changing our bylaws. So
I just want to bring it back to the surface for our listeners. The charter. Yeah, charter, bylaws. All of
yeah,
these
so
are.
legislation, yes, the legislation that which came out of city council, committee on council. So
Hmm.
legislation, which with the legislation, they decided to change the city charter. So this position and this
Hmm.
office is now in the city charter.
Hmm. So those,
Um,
those are big policy. I mean, when you talk about policy revisions and updates in anything in this innovative space, right? And you mentioned it before. So Atlanta is one of the few municipalities, if not the only, with this type of structure. For other folks even outside the city that want to know more about this, to say, hey, we're looking at the charter, in having a conversation where you say, hey, the charter may need to be changed. Being somebody that has been a practitioner, folks are like, whoa, 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 the chart has to be changed. These are real things. And
right.
I just want to make sure that we highlight that because they can take a while. In a lot of conversations, you got to build consensus on that because, policy has to be stacked in a way that it's effective for you all to do what you need to do to get the public confidence
Hmm. And
where,
I
where
will
you need it.
definitely say, I think between November to February, I was like, I don't think I've been down to City Hall that many times because between
Mhm.
committee on council meetings, and full council meetings, and expressing my concern as the chair of the board, and just making sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's, and just being there. I was like, man, I'm up here almost like twice a week.
Listen, and so what's beautiful about that, as we even talk about League of Women Voters, there's this conversation that we're continuously having because of the season that we're in Georgia right now. Where the country's watching us because of the political engagement. And I talk a lot about the dichotomy between political engagement and civic engagement. Same tree, same covering, same family, but when you talk about going to the meetings and spending this time, that civic engagement as a civic leader is sometimes different than just going and casting a ballot for a candidate, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of it again is totally related. Our civic duty aligning with our civic commitments. Especially for shout out to Empower. The work and the platform that we're building through trying to get people more civically engaged. I'm glad you mentioned that because it really, really takes a lot of your time, your
Yes.
energy. And when you're walking down the city hall, say, yeah, I'm doing some good for the people. And people are like, you know what I mean? It's thankless too. It can be thankless.
It can
But to
be,
get to this point.
yeah, it can be. And then you also have your cheerleaders that are just like, I'm so proud of you, or I'm glad, and, sending you those messages. And I, I appreciate all of them who do that for me. It's great. It's a great feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going down there, like I said, because this was really important to make sure that we had our input part of it, not, because we're the ones who's going to have to manage this position and manage the expectations of the city.
Totally.
So, and we are the ones who hire the inspector general. So we want to make sure that, we had our input in that conversation. And it's emails, it's, conversations, it's going down to City Hall when we could go down to City Hall. And even, like I said, doing behind the scenes now that we were in COVID and just working that, like, a lot of people don't realize it went from charter to now, okay, it's in the city charter. So now as a board, we had to look at the old bylaws of our board. How do we update the bylaws that it complements the legislation? Changing a name of the board is simple, but the document was almost 10 years old. So going back and really updating it and really having everyone's feedback on our bylaws. Mm-hmm. So that was our first step, fixing our bylaws. Second step was building the job description. And, even though none of us are very smart, intelligent people, none of us are HR people. So we're building a job description. So, we're taking input from everybody. Myself as a business owner and an operator, I have probably a little bit more HR background, but I'm not an HR person. But we're taking information from the lawyers. We're taking information from the CPA, because you have to realize this inspector general had to understand ethics, has to understand compliance, and has to understand procurement and fraud. So you have to put this in the job description. The person you want has to be able to hit all these dynamics.
Yeah.
So we're having that conversation on the side now that the city is doing virtual meetings with their overall city, like finance, overall city departments, like the finance and budget committees and things like that. I think I jumped on their call because now they're putting in the budget for the Office of Inspector General. So now that's another meeting that, I joined to kind of just talk about it and kind of give a brief, synopsis of where we were at that point. We went from there to getting RFPs, for a search firm.
You got to draft the RFP. You got to make sure.
Right. And the great thing is, like, the ethics office is awesome. They were our administrative arm because they are already established. So they helped us do that. But the, RFPs has to go through, procurement. They look through it. Then it's
30
sent
days,
to us.
60 days, 90 days, I'm glad you're walking through all this because I've got so many people that the energy around voters to advocates, the folks that are just in the space that says, hey, Greg, Nichola, what can I do to get involved and plugged in? These are the types of things. You don't have to be the chair of the governance space for the inspector general, but these are the types of commitments where I think from a lead by example standpoint, people like yourself that are saying, hey, this energy around change, sign me up, I'll be held accountable for that. But a big education component of that, Nichola, is telling people what that looks like. And,
right. And it's not overnight. It's not going to change. Yeah. It's not going to be like, oh, wow. Think about, we just said that it went into legislation February of 2020. The person that we picked and found nominated in November and was just appointed by City Council December 7th. So almost a whole year. a
Yeah.
year from the beginning of the conversation, almost a whole year of when it became, legislation.
Mhm.
So it's not something that happens overnight. And even sometimes, even council members, I had to have conversations with council members when they were like, well, when are we going to see some candidates? And blah, and that's like, you understand this is a high level executive position. So regardless if it
Mhm.
was government or not, it's a high level position
Mhm.
that has to have certain skill set.
And
And
you're a volunteer,
I'm a
correct?
volunteer. We do not,
Yeah,
no one on my board gets paid. we
let me
don't,
make sure,
we don't, we don't even get parking.
because folks are saying, y'all don't get parking either.
We don't get
Because
parking.
folks are looking at that and say, yeah, I want to do that. And they say, wait a second, you don't get paid to do it.
We don't get paid. We
Again,
don't
it's
get
a big
paid.
educational opportunity.
Right.
And thank you for your service,
Thank
because
you. Thank you.
I
Like I
think
said, yeah, we don't get parking either. We,
man, it's
this
expensive to
year,
park downtown too.
and we used to be excited to go to our retreats because at least for the retreats, we get a little breakfast. We had a virtual retreat this year. It was fun. But it's like we didn't even get breakfast.
Listen, I'm just, and thank you for walking us through that. It might seem very normal to you and your space, or even for me, for my knowledge, and I'm heavy in the civic space. But for those folks that are looking to double and triple down on their advocacy and how they spend their time, because they're so passionate about politics, it's very important for leaders like you in telling that story and how to connect to say, hey man, while I see you in my timeline, I see you in the DMs, or hey sister, I see you out doing your thing, signing up and serving is also a way to mature and evolve that, that involvement and engagement, to say, hey, if I want good government, I need to be in these rooms, or have
Yeah.
just a relationship to be of counsel and to counsel, to say, Nicole, I'm passionate about this thing, but this is how I see this policy. If I saw you change this, we all have the opportunity to jump in. And I
And
think
you
that,
do. And all these meetings, regardless if it's the board that I chair or any other board or any committee that is part of city government, it's all public. So, you can pop in and listen to our meetings, state some questions, understand what's going on. If you are interested in the Office Inspector General, we meet the third Thursday of every month. But say you don't, say you want to listen more into the Citizen Review Board. These are all public meetings. So, and I encourage everybody who's involved, as you stated before, Greg, you were talking about, the weight of the 2 Senate races and people getting people out to vote and for them to understand. I'm a true component of local politics. I want people to understand that local civic engagement is what starts it before we get to anywhere else. So.
And you mentioned the Citizens Review Board. Shout out to Cecilia, Cece.
Yes,
I don't know if she's
I
still
love
chair over
Cece.
there, but shout out to another
She is.
civic leader in the space. I know that she does a lot
And
with.
past president for Legal Women Voters.
Listen, y'all swinging for the fences. Can I be a member of Legal Women Voters?
You can. We are not
Okay.
gender biased, even though the word says women in it. You can.
That's what I'm asking. I mean, it's just, man, I just absolutely love the leadership that y'all have been showing and just holding down. I mean, sisters have been leading the way in this space for just setting an example for guys like me. Setting an example. And so, are you there, Nicole? I thought
I'm
that
still
you
here.
got
Can you
frozen.
see
I'm
me?
sorry. And so talking about Legal Women Voters, with the election and
Yeah. Oh,
pushing,
I keep
civic.
losing my internet.
I'm sorry. And so you still, okay. All right, cool. And so talking about Legal
can see
Women
you.
Voters, that's the
I'm still
virtual
there.
space, man. We got Saturday mornings, we get into the afternoon, and so people starting to wake up and get on their Wi-Fi.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I was like, all of a sudden,
Right,
it's like,
exactly. People like, hey,
hazy
what's
there.
going on?
I keep moving my laptop. Like maybe it's my laptop. It's like,
No,
I don't know how
it's
this works.
more
Like,
people getting up and getting on the systems, right? It's
right.
so
It's all good. We all used to it now. Like it's 9 months in, right?
Yeah. But to really, really bring things home, it's just been a phenomenal conversation. And I finished my 2 cups of Shea Latte coffee. Again, shout out to Shea Latte Coffee for sponsoring this particular episode of Coffee with Clay. And so Legal Women Voters, you are the current president of that organization, has been doing a lot of lean in work. What's your message to folks around the work that you're doing and your the future as you see it for opportunities for League of Women Voters. I know that y'all just had a candidate forum this week for the Public Service Commission seat,
Yes.
which is a very important race, which is also on the ballot with our two Senate races. Talk a little bit about that before we get out of here and get into the afternoon.
So yeah, so League of Women Voters, we're a 100-year-old organization that is a nonpartisan political organization. And what people don't understand, some people think that's an oxymoron in today's world, nonpartisan. But we have members who are on both sides of the aisle. We have members on our board that are on both sides of the aisle. Our main focus is to make sure that we're educating voters. So when you go to the polls, you have all the information you need to make an educated decision. We do not endorse candidates. We do not encourage or make anyone stance on any type of legislation or policy. Once again, when we do advocacy and oversight, we give you all the information, and we try to make sure that both sides are represented if we are having any type of forum or program, so that you can hear it. And that's the key thing. Myself as the president, my goal is just to make sure that people are engaged. They are empowered, and they are educated.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my overall goal for my presidency. We are a membership-based organization. So,
Okay.
All our funding comes from membership dues and kind donations. This year has been a phenomenal year, obviously, because of it being a presidential election race. That people just want to kind of donate to organizations like ourselves, because we
That's
don't
good.
take a political stance. It's people really want to make sure that we are getting the education out there. And as I stated before, we're not gender biased. So even though it says women, League of Women Voters, we do have male members. And so you can join as a male, Greg. So
Okay.
I'm expecting to see that email come through. We have a new member.
You see the smile, right?
And
that's good.
I know. I
That's
was
good to
saying,
know.
it's like, yeah. So you just need to go to LWVAF. So it's the 5 letters, League of Women Voters Atlanta Fulton County. So LWVAF.org, and you'll see all the information about our organization. But yeah, we just had a candidate forum. And shout out to my board there too, because since our new term started in June 1st, so we go fiscal year, June to May, we do a fiscal year.
Okay.
Since the primaries, we've had, I think we had 7 candidate forums.
Wow.
Now this is since July. Since July, we've had 7 candidate forums. We had 3 voter education type of programs.
Mm-hmm.
And then countless opportunities for myself to talk to people about voting and how it's important to vote,
Mm-hmm.
and why you should vote. So, my board this past Thursday, we were just like, whew, last forum for the year. But as we all know, as Atlantans, we seem like we vote almost every other month. This is also an election year for our city.
Yeah.
So 2021 is our election year for our city. Our council members, our mayor, the election will be this year. So we will be back again doing some candidate forums. We're doing some great programs. We're working on some great programs to start getting the next generation voters. That's what we're going to call it. And that's going to be for our high school students.
Okay.
And putting
We've got to talk about that. We've got to talk about that because we're working on something else. I don't want to let the cat out the bag, but we've had some conversations from the empowered side of things with another city vertical around getting high school students. We're actually piloting some things right now with some high schools.
So we can definitely talk offline. Let's talk offline and have those conversations, because people always want to push these kids to just go register to vote, but it's not just registering to vote. Once again, they are voters. They need to be educated and be engaged and understand how they work, their voice works. And as I stated before, I'm a true believer about it all starts local.
Yeah.
It's
and
like
shout out to the E100 South Metro. They had a forum this week as well, and we talked about young voters. And even for my volunteer involvement and engagement, we have conversations with folks in middle school that see and recognize the moment, and even before they're 17 and a half, when they can register to vote, folks are talking about being advocates in the space. They're talking about issues. And so sixth, seventh, eighth graders are having these candid conversations amongst themselves because they're empowered. You know, for me to hear you say illegal women voters, we're talking about this next gen. That's the runway. That's the pipeline for educating kids that mature even before they get 17 and a half years old. You know, when I was 14, I wasn't thinking about, I mean, kids are just so sharp now, but the issues also are, you know, they're just so thick, and our kids are dealing with so much. And so that's
It's so
awesome that
different.
you mentioned that.
Yeah, and that's, you know, and that's what we have to. I mean, we have to make these kids to be what we call now super voters. You know, I laugh at the term because, you know, it's like people are like, oh, you're a super voter because I've been voting since I was 18. Yeah, like it's
Right,
like I've been
right.
voting since I was 18. But I was like, I personally been voting since I was 18, but I've been going to the polls since I was a kid. It was a family obligation. You know, it's like we went as a family to the polls. So it's my grandparents, it's my mom, it's my aunts and uncles. We went to the polls together, like waited to everyone off of work, and we all went to the polls together to vote. So I've been in those polls, you know, from the old where you used to be in the back in Long Island, like, you know, in Amityville, we'll be in our school's gym. And they'll be
Yeah,
like, I was just here like 2 hours ago, you know, because they let you out early for school because it was
yeah.
election season. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, my first ballot was cast as an absentee ballot because I went to school in California. And my first ballot
Okay.
cast was an absentee ballot. So learning what does absentee look like? And then coming back, considering that I was an absentee ballot for so many years because of being in college, coming back and being able to vote in my district, I wasn't even on the roster. So my next ballot was a provisional because I had been
Wow.
listed as an absentee for so many years that they didn't even have me listed. So these are the things that, you know, we want to make sure that this next generation understands. Like, you can go to college and you can still vote, and you can still be part of the local process. You can still, you know, if they don't find your name, that doesn't mean you cannot vote. You know, this which was it? I think it was the primaries was, yeah, because that was the one that was really bad for Fulton County.
Yeah,
Um, you don't know how many emails and text messages I was telling people to don't leave the line.
yeah.
It's like, I don't care what they say, do not leave the line. Like, you know, and I'm sending
From
these messages out.
from that experience, I signed up to be a poll worker, and hearing the narrative of folks like Vanessa Kelly, who is doing some awesome community work. And I've been working polls just from, you know, that customer service experience of greeting people, making sure the experience is enjoyable. You know, we can't say anything regarding candidates, right? But making sure that if things don't align, that you're, to your point, casting a provisional ballot, and the education around it to say, hey, your vote is going to count. It just has to be provisional because of, you know, you might be out of precinct, or this might not, you know, there are certain reasons why one would, but, you know, going through that experience and, you know, working for government and all these other experiences that I've had in the space, it's eye opening. I mean, it is eye opening, and it's really serious work when we talk about, you know, the work that you're doing to get people to the polls. If they have a very bad experience at the polls, or somebody, you know, said something, or, you know, that experience should be enjoyable throughout,
Mm-hmm.
you know, exercising your civic duty.
It should. And that's what we're here for, Legal Women Voters, is making sure that they are having great experience. Like I said, going there, being knowledgeable, so they don't seem like they're lost. You know, like, yeah, how they say that they're in headlights walking in, and like, I have no idea. You know, one of our members actually works for Fulton County Board of Election, and that's her job, is to educate people on how to vote. So we're
Mhm.
excited. You know, we utilize her as much as possible. Like, can you demonstrate and talk people through with the new machines
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
you know, that type of thing. But, you know, just being
Mhm.
able to have that opportunity, you know, give another shout out to someone who's a League of Women Voters. We actually have another chair. She's actually the full, on the board of elections. Mary Carrie Cooney is also a board member for
Mhm.
League of Women Voters. So, you know, all of us League of Women Voters, we're here to
Sat
just
in
make
on a
sure that
virtual, sat in
we're
on some of those virtual meetings. They were after June. Look,
I know,
she
and
looking
even
at.
now, like, she's still, like, you know, dealing with it because it comes through her. But, you know, it is, you know, it's important. And like I said, and I love the fact that it's people like myself, Mary Carroll, Cece, who live in this space of, we just want to educate. We're not picking sides, you know, regardless of personal, you know, preference or whatever. But when we're in this space, we want to make sure that we are fair to everybody, and everybody
Mm.
understands that we're fair, and that's what we want to do. And that's what I love about the League of Women Voters. There's so many organizations out there, but because you cannot be, for me, is it's all about being an educated voter. I don't care. I've been quoted already, like a couple of times, saying that as a Black woman, it is super important for me to make sure that people go out to vote. Because it was only 100 years ago that it was put on the books, hence why the League of Women Voters exists, for women to vote. And and think about it, it was longer, it's been longer for Black men on the books to vote, but it's only been 50 years that we've been able to exercise our right. And if the younger generation can understand, 50 years, that's someone's grandparent right now.
Yeah.
It's like, think about it, it's like,
Yeah.
that could be somebody, somebody's mother at this point.
Yes.
It's like, I'm only a few years away from 50. So think about that I might have not have been able to vote, so I push that. That's my passion, to kind of say, you know what, you have the opportunity. Don't waste that opportunity. Because if you think about it, if your mother is 55, if your mother's 60 years old, she could, even though on the books it says she could, 9 out of 10 times she wasn't allowed to. And so now you have the opportunity to do that. And when, and another thing I have is when people talk about, like I said, my community, my community, my community. And that's why I always push back about local politics. Your community is local politics. Yes, we do need, we do have Senate races up. We do have a president. We do have congressional positions up. We even have state senators, you have state representatives. But if you want your community to be changed, if you got a pothole in your neighborhood, or your street is dirty, or that's city, that is city politics. If you have a noise ordinance that you want to put in place, that's city politics. Nothing's wrong with state representatives, but they have a bigger picture. They have to look at a bigger space. If you look at
even elections and health and welfare, county services, the differences between, city and county services, the school board, if you're passionate about education, there's so many different portals,
different aspects and portals
around your issue.
Right. And that all is right then and there. There's nothing wrong with our federal representation, because they are going to look out for the best part for your state. But when you want to worry about your day-to-day is your Fulton County. Like this year, we had our three of the seats for our Fulton County commissioners. Yep. 2021, we have the remaining 4 come up. So these are your Fulton County people. These are the people who are making choices for your Fulton County dollars. And that's when you want to really say, how does your day-to-day change? You have to be involved, not just every 4 years. You have to be involved every year, every month, every day. Sit in on these city council meetings. Sometimes they're long. This last one, they had like 900 comments. I was like, ooh. It was a crazy, they had it went into like 2 or 3 days. I was like, ooh, public comments. But sit on that.
Hard. And I had to do public comment at Fulton County Schools recently. And do you know that it wasn't, and this ain't to talk bad, but I'm just saying, in this season, there wasn't a virtual way. I had to literally mask up, go down there and talk at the microphone. I had to stand at the lectern and talk, because there wasn't another option for my voice to be heard. And so.
And I appreciate that, because you still make sure your voice is heard. And that's what's important. We have to make sure our voices are heard. And either if it's virtual, this is what I'm passionate about. And that's what we have to make sure everyone understands. Is from this call, or anytime anybody talks to me, they know I'm all about using your voice. And using your voice is being involved.
Beautiful. Nichola, you swung for the fences and knocked my last question out of the park as you were answering it. I didn't even ask it. As you were talking, I was just smiling, because that was going to be my drive home point. But I am so grateful for not just your friendship and leadership. I'm grateful that you're here in our great city of Atlanta, and representing for these issues of importance, the leadership that you're providing, even for the rest of the world to be influenced by what we're doing in the space around ethics and compliance, and the Inspector General's offices. Like these are the types of things that don't just come, out of the sky. You have to be intentional about them. And when leaders are at the table like yourself, not just in business and helping people get their dreams into reality, not just with, a voter that's looking for more education, whether they're connected with League of Women Voters, or someone that just says, hey, I'm tired of seeing these stories about ethics in Atlanta. What can be done? Your lean in work chairing the board of the Board of Governors for the Inspector General. And so I appreciate you. Thank you. We had a great cup of coffee today as well with Shea
We did.
Latte.
We
Again,
did.
check Shea Latte out as well. And thank you so much for supporting this Coffee with Clay episode. I'm excited for your future and what you'll continue to contribute to the world in this space. And so any last thoughts or any last words?
I just want to say thank you, Greg. Yeah, I've known you for a couple of years. I remember when you were running, and it was so funny. But that's a whole funny story about, trying to get you to host. They was like, can't you host them? I'm like, no, I sit on the board. I can't host anybody. Right. But I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story, share my passion. To your viewers, to your fans and friends and stuff. It's a lot of work, but I love doing it. And Atlanta is my second home, or maybe second home. LA's moved down to the third level because that's where I went to school at. So Atlanta is my second home, and I'm appreciative for the city of Atlanta to give me these opportunities to kind of also share with them my passion and my drive, because if you think about it, it's like one of those cities that there's no other city probably could do that. New York used to be like the city for business people. If you can't make it in New York as a business person, you can't make it nowhere. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that city of Atlanta is, if you cannot make it in civic engagement, you can't make it anywhere. And if you're not part of the Atlanta culture here. Sure. So I'm so grateful. Thank you for my adopted city.
No, all good. We always talk about how Atlanta full, right? But we got plenty room. Plenty of room. Let me say that room, as a fourth generation native. Look, we got plenty of room for people like you. We make room. We'll scoot over for folks like you. You know what I mean?
But you'll tolerate my little talk about snow, right? I'll be like, y'all really upset about snow?
Don't you say the S word? Don't you say the S word?
But I'm just saying you'll tolerate me when I make fun of you.
Okay, yeah. You can't say the I word or the S word as we go into December. You know what I mean? In January, Lord. You can't say either one of those words. You can type them, but can't say them.
I can type it. Okay, as long as you guys tolerate me when I do type those words to say, yes. Okay, I need you to suck it up a little bit. Put some salt on there and keep it moving.
Well, again, thank you, Nichola, for joining me this morning for Coffee with Clay. For those folks that tuned in via Zoom, for those folks that tuned in via Facebook Live.
It froze a little bit. I think you...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so for those folks that tuned in via Zoom and also Facebook Live, again, the home of all this content, you can find at gregclay.com/purpose-driven-pivot. And we appreciate you guys so much. The charge is out there for people like Nichola. For me, as somebody that's in the space, I know that the opportunities are out there as well. But keep leading, and y'all stay blessed and stay covered. And so thank you again for spending time with us. All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.